I'm Ivanova Smith, and I'm lead faculty. I do a lot of disability civil rights activism in Washington State. I'm a leader in several self-advocacy organizations. Today, though, I'm going to be talking to you guys about identities and how our identities shape us and the people around us, and how we all have different identities, and those different identities are good and valuable and help make who we are. So that's really what we're going to focus on. So we're going to talk about solid identities, so identities that you're born this way and it doesn't change. And then we're going to also talk about identities that are fluid, so identities that change based on time, based on activities, based on what we were raised with, our cultural experiences and perspectives. These are all different ways that, these are all different identities and different ways that identities become known. So there's some identities that you're born with. I was born in Latvia when it was the Soviet Union. I was born in a different country. That makes me an immigrant, and that makes me I was born in Latvia. I cannot say I was born in the U.S. That's an identity I have that will not change. That's always going to be known about my history. Another identity that it doesn't change is being a human. The characteristics that makes you different from other humans. So skin color, eye color, the way that your bones are built, your DNA, how your DNA forms your body. Those are all biological things that... Huh? Be careful.
Be careful, girls.
So those are all solid identities. And then there are fluid identities. Fluid identities are identities that change over time, or they change based on activities you do. One great example of this is Alexandra. Alexandra used to be a newborn, but now she's a toddler. She can walk around. And her identity is going to change. She's going to grow up and she's going to become an adult. That's an identity that changes. Who here was once a kid? Yeah, all of you? Yeah, we were all once kids, and now what are we? We're not kids anymore, right?
No.
Yep, we're adults. And so that's an example of an identity that's different. I did an activity, getting married to my husband, and that changed my identity from not being a parent to becoming a parent. So my identity changed because of this little girl. Some identities people used to think were solid, like gender. People used to think that gender was set to your biological sex. Nowadays, there's new research that gender is actually a fluid identity, one that could change, or one that you realize is different from your biological sex. So that example of that would be, I have excess chromosome. I was born with female characteristics. I also, but I identify as transmasculine. I express myself in very masculine ways, even though I have excess chromosomes. And so that is something that's new, that is a fluid identity with gender. Another way that people identities change is becoming an uncle or an aunt. When my sister had a kid, I became an aunt. or some people, they become uncles. So, that's based on other people's actions. So some identities can happen based on other people's actions, and some can be based on your own actions. So an identity that I've gained based on my own actions is I play basketball. And that makes me a basketball player. When I'm playing basketball on my team, I'm a basketball player. When I'm drawing and I'm wanting to show off my artwork, I'm being an artist. That's an identity based on your passion, your activities. Does anybody have any questions on that so far, or comments? Yeah, so some identities are based on the cultural. So family traditions, things that you grew up with, religious faiths. Like some people, they are Muslims, they're Jewish, they're Hindu. Their faith is based on what their family's faith is. Sometimes it isn't though. Sometimes people don't have the same faith as their families, and that's okay too. But cultural identities are another important aspect of this. Anybody have any questions or comments? Yeah, but anyway, so cultural identities is another identity that people can grow up with. For me, I'm a Christian. For other people, they could be something else. And families are basically two cultural traditions of two different families merging together into a family culture. So my family culture with my husband and my daughter, a lot of it is connected to the family culture of my husband's family and my adopted family. And then because I'm a transnational adoptee, I have the unique thing of sharing that perspective of my Latvian culture that my adopted parents may not be able to share. Because they were not born in Latvia, where I was. And so that makes my identity different than my family's. And that's true. Sometimes you have identities that are different from your family. And that's okay. So physical features. Some physical features we can change. Hair color. People can dye their hair a bunch of different colors. I've seen people with blue hair now and purple hair. And that's okay. People like to dye their hair different colors. I've never dyed my hair, so my hair has always stayed dark brown. One thing that can't really change, and it's not, this is looked down upon when people try it, but skin color can't change. Skin color stays the same. I'm olive skinned, and nothing that's going to change that. So those are like physical characteristics that you were born with that they can't be changed. But that doesn't mean that they're negative in any way. Another identity that I have that I was born with that I can't change is having a developmental disabilities. I was born with my disabilities. I was born prematurely. And that makes me different. That I've had to request accommodations and help with that to be able to live in a community. But sometimes society has a hard time accepting that identity. Like there's this other thing that we people of all different identities have had to experience, and that is called discrimination. Discrimination is basically when you're discriminated based on your identities. Who here who here has ever faced discrimination? Yeah? Yeah? I've experienced it too. So I had to deal with people saying to me, well, you don't get to take this history class because you have IDD. And so I was denied an academic opportunity when I was in school because of my disability, and there was nothing I can control or change. So that is called discrimination when that happens, and it's not right, and it's something that you should always advocate against, and you should never allow people to just get away with that. Discrimination based on your identities is something that we want to discourage, and that's why I've come to talk to you about it today. Is I want you to learn about your own identities and how that impacts your life, and to be able to get to know yourselves better, to also get to know your classmates better, and so, and how you guys can support each other. And so, people have been trying really hard. How do we solve this problem of stopping discrimination? And there's been two different methods. One method that we know of is called equality, and that was the thought of, oh, we just give everybody the same thing. You know, we gave everybody the same box, and that's the support. And everybody just gets the same thing, and that's equal. That's equality. Well, they realized that there's some problems with this because all identities are different. We're all different from each other because we all come from different cultural backgrounds. We all pass through different activities, and we all have different family experiences and physical characteristics. That not everything that fits is the same works for each person. See, this is a baseball game here, and these two people can't see it because just having one box doesn't help them be able to see the game. And so they're still not getting the support they need, and they're not getting to participate even though they've been given the same thing. There's this new model called equity that says that let's give people what they need. Instead of just giving everybody the same thing, let's give them what they individually need as a person. And so that way people get the right amount of support they need and can see the game, and everybody is able to participate and see the game. And so that is, following this model is a way to help us understand each other and support each other in the community, and to see our differences as a positive, and see the skills that we develop by being different and having all of these different identities. One thing that causes discrimination is this thing called bias. Has anyone heard the word bias before? A bias is a view that we gain based on our own identities that could make us not understand or appreciate other people's identities. And so, for example, if a person who's never met a person who can't have pork, like a person who's Jewish who can't have pork because that's part of their faith, meets a person who never have heard of that, never met a Jewish person before, and he tries to give them a pork sandwich. They give, pork is delicious, pork is the best, how can you not like pork? That is an example of an implicit bias, or a bias that's indirect. It's a hidden bias that the person did not realize that they were offending the person by trying to give them a pork sandwich. They didn't know that, they didn't understand. So even if you don't understand another person's culture, sometimes by not being able to understand, you can gain biases in your mind about other cultures because you don't know about those cultures. You've not met people from those cultures and those identities. And so one thing to try to stop discrimination or prevent discrimination is to try to remind ourselves of our own biases and to think, oh, maybe I'm not, I need to be more careful what I say about people of this identity group because I don't know that much about those people. So I need to be more careful, and I need to be careful on how I think about those groups. Am I thinking of them in a negative way or a positive way? That's called trying to confront your biases. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. So that's a way that you can try to prevent discrimination. So with that would create more diversity. Diversity is basically saying that all of us with all of our different identities, that we have value and that we should value each other and work together. And so now that I've got to talk to you guys about these identities, I now want you to do an activity. I would like you to get out a piece of paper and a pen, and if you don't have a piece of paper, I have extra ones up here. But I want you to draw a picture of yourself and think about all of the activities you enjoy doing, the family values that you have, and the values you have of yourself, and write and draw that out to try to help kind of see what is your identities, what makes you, and then I want you to get with a partner and talk to your partner about these identities and how they're different. There are some identities that you want to become, that you dream of becoming. Like some people, that's their career. The career they identify with really strongly. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a scientist. I want to be a game engineer, a game designer. These are identities that you can become. And it takes time and effort. It takes action. One thing that I saw with everybody sharing, with the people sharing, that people had different values to different identities. Some people they really valued being a sister, being a mother, being connected to a family. The connection with a family was very important. And some people it was very much based on I want to do this thing. And more on an activity. So that is a great example and showcase of you all have different identities and you all have different values on your different identities. So some of you may have identities that you don't really think about and that you don't really talk about, but they're still part of your identity. And you have identities that you want to talk about more because you have more passion in that. And usually people have more strength, that feeling with activity type identities than identities they're born with. But it's healthy to have pride in both and see your body and your physical characteristics as a positive part of your identity. And that also includes disability. Some people may have told you in the past that you needed to look down on your disability, that disability shouldn't be part of your identity, but that's actually not really the case, because disability is something a lot of times we're born with, and you can't control if you have a disability or not. And so I wanted to help people think differently about disability and not have a bias against disability, but see disability as just another positive aspect of human life, that it's just another human variant. Alexandra, she has, her body's going to change, know, she's small right now, a little baby, but she's gonna become an adult. But she's always going to be, she's always gonna have fair skin, and she's, you know, she's always gonna have her brown eyes, and she's always going to be known to have been born in Washington State. And so those are things that she can't control, but things that she will change over time as her growth, and her body will get bigger, and yeah. So, you know, some identities are fluid, but some identities you keep for the rest of your life, and that's okay, and there's value in both. Did anybody here, did they learn something new about the person they partnered with, about the identities that they didn't think about or know about? Does anybody want to share that? Yeah? Want to share that?
I don't really know her, just met her that she likes art, she used to do badminton. What was the other sport that you said, Yna-Vianca? Badminton, you mentioned another sport you did at high school? And basketball.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool. So do you feel like that's made it, do you think that this activity has made you more comfortable with your classmates or less comfortable with your classmates?
Doesn't really change my perspective.
Huh?
Doesn't really change my perspective. I just met her and I had nothing against her, so.
Yeah, well it doesn't, but yeah. So it does, but it gave you, I'm not saying like made you, that you had negative feelings before, I'm saying like, but did you feel like now you guys can strike up a conversation more?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, okay. That's cool, that's awesome. Did anybody else gain any insights on this activity? What did you guys get out from this activity? Was there any identities that you felt uncomfortable sharing on the paper? Sometimes there are identities that it may be uncomfortable to talk about, and that's okay too. Some identities you don't want to share with everyone, and that's okay.
Especially in today's political climate, a lot of people are afraid to share if they are gay
Yeah.
or if they're trans, any of those things, because there's such a bad bias on it.
Yes.
You know, and so that's makes it really scary for some people to share a lot of information.
I feel like it's not even just people not understanding. It's like, for example, these days, like, you have a lot of poor people in the streets, right? And so a lot of people come from, okay, I gave him money, and so he went and bought himself cigarettes. And you think, okay, just because that one person does it, every single person coming from that position is going to do that.
Yeah. So a person's actions could affect how you see that person.
Not just that person, but that whole minority.
Yeah, you see the whole group like that.
Yeah.
That's another example of implicit bias. Because you saw one person of an identity group do something that you saw was like, oh, that's not a good thing. Sometimes our brains can make us think, well, then that whole group is like that. So that example of homelessness is a really good example of that. It's because we've seen, we've heard stories, or we've seen a homeless person, somebody do that, we may think, oh, homeless people are like that, so we should never give money to them. But that's not always the case. There are people that really need help, or they're just really hungry and they just want a couple of dollars to get into a Burger King. And so that's something that to think about is how your personal experience with a person, if you've had a negative experience, to not take that negativity and think, well, and go after that person's identity. So like, let's say you have somebody that they are Eastern European. I'm Eastern European. And I hit somebody that, and that person who I hit, that person may now have a negative connotation of Eastern Europeans because of my action. But that's what could cause bias, because that was my own individual action. That does not reflect on my community and my identity. It should reflect on my own individual self and my mistake in hitting that person. And so you should never use your identity to say, oh, well, I hit that person because I'm autistic. That's not an excuse to harm a person.
Actually, I see people who try to use autistic as an insult.
Yes, so that's another thing is sometimes discrimination comes in a form of people using your identities against you, attacking you for your identities, making fun of you for your identities. So that's stigmatization. So that's called stigma. And stigma, I'm going to write that word up here so you guys can learn it. So stigma is it's a negative image. It's a negative image about a person's identity. So, like, it gives you a negative image in your mind about an identity group. Has anybody had thoughts like this? Like with your example with the homeless person, that's a really good example of this. Is that's a way that people can be stigmatized, is by you see somebody makes a report or they say something, I saw this one person do this, and so the whole identity group is like that. And that's called stigma. And we've all probably experienced it. So when people say things like, oh, those disabled people, they can't do as good, they don't deserve to get the same rights as everyone else, that's part of stigma. That's because they think that they have the negative view that all people with disabilities are burdens. But that's not true. And we know that ourselves because we experience it. We live our lives, we're active, we do things. It's like, hey, you can't tell me I don't do things because I have a disability. And there's a ton of non-disabled people that are couch potatoes. So stigma is something that it's what bias can become. So biases and discrimination, they all work together in putting down a person's identity, which is not a good thing. We want people's identities we want people to feel positive about themselves. I want you guys to feel positive about who you are as a person. And it's not just based on one thing. You all have multiple identities, both fluid and solid. And those all intersect with each other. They're all connected with each other. And they're all things that you should see as a positive. And just because you make a mistake, it doesn't mean that it reflects on your identity. Sometimes every human has made a mistake in something. Yeah, every one of us is going to make a mistake. Every one of us is going to do something we're not supposed to do, like a little peanut roll right now. We're not supposed to touch this outlet. But see, being a human, she doesn't understand that outlets can cause her pain. So sometimes we have to have little reminders. But that doesn't reflect on you and your identities. It doesn't reflect on you as a person. And so every person, they're all individuals with different identities. And that is why we want diversity, because diversity is all of us with our different identities working together and connecting with each other in a community. So that's really why I wanted to come here today and share that with you and help you understand that, so we can make a more equitable world. So thank you.